Sushruta for NEET is now available on the Google Play Store. Try it out for free.
In today's class, let us start the study of human respiratory system. You know very well, we respire with the help of lungs. How the air goes to the lungs? That's the question. For that, we breathe in air through the nose. You know we have two small apertures just above the lips, upper lip. And these two apertures, whatever you have at the tip of the nose, these are called external nostrils. Remember, they are called external nostrils. Nostrils are also called by another word, nares. N-E-R-E-S. So we breathe in with the help of external nostrils. We take in the air. Where it goes? It goes to what is called the space inside the nose. We call it nasal passage. It goes to the nasal passage. And there are two nostrils, there are two nasal passages. You know, in between that, we have a septum. There is a septum. We come across in between the nasal passage, nasal septum. Nasal septum. Right? So, nasal passage is one. Many times, whenever there is no one around us, we make it a point to just introduce our fingers, little finger or both the fingers together, making some sort of forceps like that, and you start cleaning it. We start removing all this whatever dried mucus is there, that we are going to take it and we want to make it very clean. We want to see that it is cleaned. That is the nasal passage. This leads to two more apertures here. You have two more apertures here. If you go near a mirror and watch your nose, you see two more apertures here. And these two apertures are called internal nostrils. They are called internal nostrils. Internal nostrils, or they are also called internal nares. Internal nostrils or internal nares. Right? So, this nasal passage, or sometimes we say that nasal passage leads to nasal chamber. The nasal chamber opens into the pharynx, and this pharynx is formed of three areas or compartments, so to say. Through this, our food and air, both these pass. Now let us see. What is this? See, our pharynx is differentiated into nasopharynx, where the nasal passage leads to oropharynx, where our oral cavity leads to, and laryngopharynx, where the pharynx leads to the next part, that is the larynx. So we have three regions in the pharynx: nasopharynx, oropharynx, and laryngopharynx. And you must know that the pharynx is the common passage for both the food and the air. Right? Nasopharynx opens through glottis of the larynx region into trachea. So, nasopharynx leads to the glottis, which leads to the trachea. So, we have an aperture, and this aperture is called glottis. This glottis leads to the trachea. Or what I want to say, the pharyngeal region, whatever you have seen. Now we are looking into nasopharynx because the nasopharynx is concerned with the nose. Oropharynx is concerned with the oral cavity, that part of the pharynx which is very much nearer to the oral cavity is called oropharynx. So nasopharynx opens through glottis, no doubt. At that time, it comes in contrary to the oropharynx also. Through nasopharynx opens through glottis of the larynx region to trachea. So the glottis is the aperture of the tube called trachea. You can see here, this is what you have the glottis. And this glottis is the aperture of that of the trachea, windpipe, whatever you have. Right? Larynx is a cartilaginous box. Always ask a question. Larynx is made up of. It is a cartilaginous box. It is made up of cartilage. You might have heard about the Adam's apple here in our neck region. So, larynx is a cartilaginous box which helps in sound production. Therefore, it is also called sound box. Sound box. In the same way, you might have sometimes wondered why that birds so nicely they sing. They have also like that box, sound producing box, but it is not called a larynx. In case of birds, it is called a syrinx. Birds have syrinx. We have larynx. During swallowing, glottis can be covered by a thin elastic cartilaginous flap, and this elastic flap is called epiglottis. You know, epi means above. The one which is situated above the glottis, this is the glottis. The flap which is situated above the glottis is called epiglottis. This is epiglottis. Epiglottis. Epi means above. Above the glottis, it is a epiglottis. Okay? So, you have epiglottis. Always ask a question is that epiglottis is made up of cartilage, muscles, both of these or none of these. You must know that it is made up of cartilage. It is a cartilage flap. At the same time, you should know it is elastic, thin elastic. Many times it happens when we eat our food, all of a sudden we just get hiccups, and elderly people will tell us, drink water or look up, or sometimes you'll be just beaten on the upper part of the scalp. Yes, just to see that the stuck epiglottis is again going back to its original position. The hiccup that you get or the cough that you get may be due to some tiny particle of the food trying to get into our glottis. So immediately when the epiglottis comes back and starts doing its work properly, we feel relaxed, right? So this is another diagram showing you the anatomy of larynx. You can see a glottis. You can see the upper part epiglottis. Glottis, epiglottis, vocal cords, all these are present in the larynx region. So what you should know is that glottis is an aperture present in the larynx. Present in the larynx. Now let us come to the trachea. Trachea is a straight tube. It is a straight tube extending up to the mid-thoracic cavity. It extends up to the mid-thoracic cavity. And at the level of fifth thoracic vertebra, very important, it divides into right and left primary bronchi. At the level of fifth thoracic vertebra, it divides into left and right. This always asks a question. At what level the trachea divides into right and left primary bronchi? So, trachea is a straight tube. Until then, it is a straight tube. Up to the level of fifth thoracic vertebra. There it divides into right and left primary bronchi. Each bronchus undergoes repeated divisions to form secondary and tertiary bronchi and bronchioles, ending up very thin terminal bronchioles. I repeat, at the fifth thoracic vertebra level, it divides into two. One is called right primary bronchi and another is called left primary bronchi. One is the right primary bronchus, another is the left primary bronchus. There are two bronchi. Each of these right and left bronchus further divides and forms secondary bronchi, tertiary bronchi, secondary bronchus divides and forms tertiary bronchus. So once primary bronchus divides, it forms two secondary bronchi. Each of the secondary bronchus divides and forms tertiary bronchi. Each divides and forms bronchiole. Bronchioles divide further and end up in a thin terminal bronchioles. So you must know, primary bronchi, there are two primary bronchi, divide and forms a secondary and a tertiary bronchi, or primary bronchi, divide and forms secondary bronchi, divide and forms a tertiary bronchi, divide and forms a bronchioles, divide and forms terminal bronchioles. So the primary bronchus ends in a terminal bronchiole. What happens later? Is it stopped now? No. It continues further. So, look here. This is what you have the trachea. Windpipe, trachea, this one. Starting from larynx. Inside the larynx, you have glottis. Okay. So, trachea, windpipe divides. This is primary bronchus. These two are primary bronchi. Primary bronchus. This is right side and this is left side. Primary bronchus divides and forms secondary bronchi. You can see here, secondary bronchi, 1, 2, secondary bronchi. Secondary bronchus divides and forms tertiary bronchi. These are all tertiary bronchi. Tertiary bronchi divides and forms a bronchiole. Bronchioles end in a terminal bronchiole. Bronchioles end in terminal bronchioles. I repeat, primary bronchus divides and forms a secondary bronchi divides and forms a tertiary bronchi divide and forms a bronchiole, and bronchioles divide and end up in a terminal bronchioles. Right? Terminal bronchioles. Look here. You have here secondary bronchus, 1, secondary bronchus 2, secondary bronchus 3. And here, secondary bronchus 1, secondary bronchus 2. Yes. Is there then difference? Is that there is a difference that on the right side there are 3 secondary bronchi? On the left side we have 2 secondary bronchi? Yes. Yes, there lies the difference. So if you see here, the right lung has 3 lobes. The right lung has 3 lobes. 1, second lobe, third lobe. Whereas left lung has only 2 lobes, 1 and 2. As there are 3 lobes, you would come across 3 secondary bronchi. 3 secondary bronchi on the right side, 2 secondary bronchi on the left side. We shall see that. Look here. You have 3 secondary bronchi. 1, 2, 3. And 2, 1, 2. Secondary bronchi. Right? These are secondary bronchi. They divide. They divide and form what you see here. Arising from this secondary bronchi, you have this roll, tertiary bronchi. These are all tertiary bronchi. Whatever that arises from the secondary bronchi. Look here. You can easily make out 3 lobes: superior lobe, middle lobe, and inferior lobe. Here only 2. That is superior lobe and inferior lobe. There is no middle lobe in the left lung. The trachea, primary bronchi, secondary bronchi, tertiary bronchi, and initial bronchioles. That is the bronchioles, initial bronchioles. You know, some of these bronchioles later, they divide and form, or they end up with the terminal bronchioles. So there are many tertiary bronchi, divide and form, bronchioles divide repeatedly, divide, and finally they end up with the terminal bronchioles. All these trachea, primary, secondary, tertiary bronchi, and initial bronchioles, not all bronchioles, initial bronchioles are supported by incomplete cartilaginous rings. It is not complete. It is incomplete cartilaginous rings. That means, if at all you see any of these windpipe, or any of these tracheal branches, you see a ring, cartilaginous ring. Of course, this part will be there on the other side. You will see only this much, cartilaginous rings. You see cartilaginous rings, which covers your trachea in front, but not behind. Suppose I show you, this is your windpipe. You have the windpipe. I am showing you windpipe. You have trachea, C-shaped cartilaginous rings like this. It is covering your trachea. It is covering your trachea in front, not behind. In behind it is open. It is front. That means my trachea, you imagine that it is my trachea, it is covering in front. In front it is covering. C-shaped. It is a C-shaped. You have incomplete cartilaginous rings. These are the rings made up of cartilage. And these are present all throughout your trachea, primary bronchus, secondary bronchi, tertiary bronchi, and initial bronchioles. We come across a supportive ring which is incomplete, therefore it is to see. If it is like this, if it is O-shaped, it is a complete ring. No, it is not complete, it is incomplete. Why? Because it leaves its trachea to widen as much as possible whenever it is required. We take sometimes a deep breath, more air has to enter in. So we have incomplete cartilaginous rings, right? So these are that rings. You can see here. These are the rings. All these are C-shaped rings, incomplete cartilaginous rings. They are the rings made up of cartilage. I think you can see here. Cartilaginous rings. They are present in the trachea, primary bronchi, secondary bronchi, tertiary bronchi, and initial bronchioles. So now the question is that, how many are there? The number is in between 16 to 20, or sometimes we say around 18. So tracheal wall, is supported by about 16 to 20 or around 18 C-shaped. See here? C-shaped. They are not O-shaped. They are C-shaped cartilage pieces. Now the question is that which type of cartilage? They are made up of hyaline cartilage pieces. They are made up of hyaline cartilage pieces. Right? Now the question is, why they are present? Why they are present? They are present to see that our trachea is always kept open. It is always kept open. At any time, your trachea cannot collapse. Cannot collapse. Our trachea should be kept open throughout as long as we live alive. Now, if you see our esophagus, I have told you on the other day also. See, if your esophagus now, when you are listening my class, if you see your esophagus is not like this tube-like structure. It will not be in tube-like fashion. Your esophagus is collapsed like this. Whenever the food is not passing, our esophagus will be like this. It is a collapsed tube. Only when food enters, it widens. And it widens in that part of the alimentary canal where the food is pushed. So it widens, narrows, widens, narrows, widens, narrows. The food passes through the esophagus jerk, by peristaltic movement. But our air tube, our windpipe, our trachea, primary, secondary, tertiary bronchi, etc., they all should be always kept open. Therefore, we possess a C-shaped cartilage rings to keep them always open. You might have seen sometimes in your garden pipe, whatever you are using to water these garden plants, the pipe, there will be two types of pipe. In some of the pipes, you see some sort of inner rings. They never collapse. In some other, nowadays, you see that they are very light. You put that only when water flows through that, it becomes a tube-like. Otherwise, it will be in collapsed condition. Look into in your kitchen, the gas pipe, which comes from the gas cylinder to the gas oven, where the flames come out. In that particular tube is just like our windpipe. It is with a ring inside. At any time, the flow of gas should not be obstructed. I hope you got my point that how is the structure of our air tube and its branches, windpipe and its branches. Each terminal bronchiole give rise to, so what is the terminal bronchiole? Let us recall primary bronchus divided and formed secondary bronchi, that divided and formed tertiary bronchi, tertiary bronchi divided and formed bronchiole, bronchiole divided and formed terminal bronchioles. They ended with the terminal bronchioles. A series of bronchioles divide and finally you see that these terminal bronchioles end up in the terminal bronchioles. Each terminal bronchiole gives rise to a number of very thin, irregular walled, vascularized, bag-like structure called alveoli, or we also call them air sacs. Air sacs. Alveoli, air filled with the sacs. Air sacs. Each of the terminal bronchiole. So, it doesn't mean that your bronchiole divide into terminal bronchiole immediately. Bronchioles repeatedly divide, and finally they end up with the terminal bronchiole. Terminal bronchioles end up with the alveoli. But remember, not immediately. Again, each terminal bronchiole gives rise to a number of very thin, irregular walled, vascular bag-like structures called alveoli or air sacs. But in between the terminal bronchiole and the alveoli, there are some structures. We shall see that. The branching network of bronchi, bronchioles, and alveoli all together constitute our lung. So what we have in our lung? All these bronchi of three different types, primary, secondary, tertiary, then bronchioles, then bronchioles includes up to terminal bronchiole and alveoli. All these comprise the lungs. I'll tell you what is there in between the terminal bronchiole and the alveoli. There is something in between the terminal bronchiole and alveoli. Let me show that. Okay. This is what the diagrammatic sketch of our lung as given in the 11th standard NCERT book. You can see very clearly, this is the larynx. The first part of the larynx is in the larynx you come to glottis. Glottis is covered by epiglottis. This is the larynx. This is the windpipe or trachea. You can see this is the primary bronchus. Primary bronchi dividing from secondary dividing from tertiary bronchioles. Ultimately, come across, they end up with the air sacs called alveoli, right? And these lungs are covered by the membranes, and these are called pleural membranes. I will show you that there are two pleural membranes, two types of pleural membranes, inner pleural membrane and outer pleural membrane. In between that, we have some fluid also. Okay, so, and this is what you have dome-shaped diaphragm. And you have heart in between the lungs. Therefore, you see that there is a notch in the lower part of the left lung so as to accommodate the heart. Right? So, this is with regard to the diagram of human respiratory system. Yeah, this is what. I said the terminal bronchiole immediately never ends with the alveoli. These are all alveoli. These are the alveoli, alveolus, plural alveoli. So it is not that the terminal bronchiole ends up in the alveoli, but terminal bronchiole divides. This is the terminal bronchiole, and it divides and forms respiratory bronchiole. See, terminal bronchiole, it divides and forms a respiratory bronchiole. These are the two respiratory bronchioles. Respiratory bronchioles divide and forms, see, 1, 2, 3. Respiratory bronchioles divide and forms alveolar duct. Alveolar duct ends with alveolar sac containing alveoli. Alveolar sac containing air sacs. Alveoli. So, I repeat, terminal bronchiole divides into respiratory bronchioles. Respiratory bronchioles divide and forms alveolar duct. Alveolar duct leads to alveolar sac containing a number of alveoli. Okay, let us see that further. Look here. Respiratory bronchioles, alveolar ducts, alveolar sac, alveoli. Right? I hope you understood. Let us see further. Look here. Alveoli. Still beautiful diagram. Look here. So beautiful. These are all alveoli. Alveoli. This is alveolar sac. Alveolar sac. Right? This is alveolar duct. Alveolar duct. Alveolar duct. Alveolar duct. Just looks like a grape bunch. Alveolar duct. Joint to form respiratory duct. Respiratory duct. Respiratory ducts joint to form. Respiratory duct is that? Respiratory bronchiole. Alveolar duct joint to form respiratory bronchiole. I shall make it in order to avoid confusion. Respiratory bronchioles. Respiratory bronchioles all lead to terminal bronchiole. And this point is not mentioned in your NCERT book. And please know this. Please note this. We have two lungs which are covered by a double-layered pleura made up of connective tissue. I already mentioned in one of my last classes on over or around or surrounding each and every delicate part in our body, there's a protective covering made up of connective tissues. The protective covering around the brain, you have already heard, it is meninges. These coverings are meninges. The protective covering around the heart, pericardium. Protective covering around the lungs, it is the pleura. Protective covering around the liver, Glissen's capsule. Protective covering around the kidney, renal capsule. So here, surrounding our lung, two lungs, surrounding each of the lung, there is a protective double-layered cover called pleura with the pleural fluid in between them. It reduces this pleural fluid present in between the two pleura. It reduces the friction on the lung surface. The outer pleural membrane is in close contact with the thoracic lining. It is the thoracic lining of the coelomic lining, whereas inner pleural membrane lies in contact with the lung surface. Let me show that they have different names. Look here. This is how your respiratory organ, human respiratory system looks like. We have two membranes. You can see it. There are two membranes. One inner one and another one outer one. There are two, inner and outer. Okay? So let me see that. See, there are two membranes. You can make it very clear. This is, of course, here you should know, this is the inner one. And inner membrane is also called visceral pleura. Inner, visceral pleura. Viscera is a mass. Whenever we say viscera pertaining to any organ, the one which is in close contact with the organ which we are speaking. This is visceral pleura, and outer one, this one, this is called parietal pleura. Not this one, here it is this one. Parietal pleura. The inner one is visceral pleura. In between that, you have pleural cavity filled with the pleural fluid. I hope it is understood clearly. Right? You can make it here. Again, this one, yellow, visceral pleura. Green one, parietal pleura. In between, you come across pleural cavity filled with the pleural fluid, water fluid, serous fluid, which avoids friction. Now we have to know two more things. Question is that right from the nose, when the air enters in, when air moves through our respiratory system, everywhere the oxygen can diffuse in and carbon dioxide can diffuse out? No. Answer is clear no. In our respiratory system, or entire respiratory system, we come across two zones or two parts. One is simply concerned with carrying the air from the tip of our nose, that is from the external nostril, up to near the alveoli. The another one is enabling the exchange of gases. So, in our entire respiratory system, there are two parts. One is called conducting part. What is that? Conducting part. Another part is called respiratory part, or also known as exchange part. Respiratory part or exchange part. One is conducting part. What is the difference between conducting part and exchange part? Where these two parts are situated, let us study now. The part of the respiratory system starting with the external nostrils, up to the terminal bronchiole. Remember, up to the terminal bronchiole. Very much important it is. Up to the terminal bronchiole constitute the conducting part. From where? From external nostrils to terminal bronchiole. I repeat, the windpipe, which is also known as a trachea. Trachea divides and forms a primary bronchi divides and forms a secondary divides and forms a tertiary bronchiole divide and forms a bronchiole, and bronchioles end up with the terminal bronchiole. Up to this terminal bronchiole, external nostril to terminal bronchiole, the part is called conducting part. And the part which starts from respiratory bronchiole, you know that the terminal bronchiole divides and leads to the respiratory bronchiole. From the respiratory bronchiole up to the alveoli is known as the exchange part. From where to where? Starting from respiratory bronchiole till the alveoli of the alveolar sac is known as the respiratory part or exchange part. Now, in what way conducting part is different from exchange part? Simply telling, conducting part conducts air. Conducting part conducts air from external nostrils up to the terminal bronchiole, including the terminal bronchiole. Respiratory part, conducting part simply conducts, carries air up to that region. It simply conducts. Respiratory part or exchange part, as the name itself indicates. In this respiratory part, which starts from respiratory bronchiole up to the alveoli, exchange of gases takes place. Diffusion of oxygen into the alveoli or blood capillaries in the alveoli, and diffusion of carbon dioxide from blood capillary to the lumen of the alveoli. It takes place in the exchange part or respiratory part. So, looking further, the conducting part transports atmospheric air to the alveoli. Conducting part transports atmospheric air to the alveoli. But remember, it transports atmospheric air to the alveoli. Alveoli, it has to conduct, no doubt. It has to conduct the air from the atmospheric air. It has to transport the air from the nostril up to the alveoli. But no exchange of gases takes place. Conducting part transports atmospheric air to the alveoli, clears the air from foreign particles. In this part, air gets humidified. In this part, air is also brought to the body temperature. That means the conducting part right from the external nostril up to the terminal bronchiole is concerned with filtering of the air, humidification of the air, and warming up of the air. These three processes should take place in the conducting part. What is that? Filtering of the air. You know, at the tip of our nose itself, on the inner side itself, you come across tiny hairs. You have tiny hairs all around. We say that the vestibular part of our nose. Inside, you come across the tiny hairs. The air gets filtered. Even we have inside ciliated epithelial lining to a certain extent that also helps in filtering. Then, when the air enters into our respiratory system, it gets humidified. Little bit of water vapors are added to that, and it also gets warmed. Why humidification? You know, there should be some medium for the exchange of gases inside our respiratory system. And our respiratory system should work in par with the body temperature. For this reason, air that enters into our respiratory system is filtered. it is humidified, and it is warm. What is the proof for that? The moment any dust particle enters into our nose, we get a sneezing to drive out to that whatever that particle by default entered inside. And even though you hold your hand in front of the nose, you feel a little bit warm. And also, if at all you put one mirror and breathe in front of that, you see that the humid nature of that. So, this part, conducting part, is mainly concerned with these three. And remember, in the conducting part, there is no exchange of gases in this part. The next one is exchange part or respiratory part. The exchange part or respiratory part is the actual site of actual diffusion of oxygen and carbon dioxide between the blood and atmospheric air. Atmospheric air, as you know, when I say that through the conducting part air is entering, the air should enter exchange part also. In the conducting part, air is simply conducted without exchange. In the exchange part, air is also conducted and is exchanged for the vital gases. Dissolved oxygen goes into the blood capillaries, and the dissolved carbon dioxide comes out from the blood capillaries. How it takes place, we are going to study later. I hope this part is understood now to you. Let me show you. Another part. 1 minute. This is what I wanted to show. Conducting part. Conducting portion. Right from your external nostril up to the terminal bronchiole. Up to the terminal bronchiole. It is a conducting part. Starting with the respiratory bronchiole. Alveolar duct and alveolar sac. It is a respiratory zone or a respiratory part, and it's a conducting part. I hope it is very clear to you. Again, showing you this conducting part or conducting zone ends with the terminal bronchiole. Remember, terminal bronchiole terminates the conducting zone. All these are conducting zone. And right from respiratory bronchiole up to the alveoli, all these are respiratory zone. I hope it is understood very clearly. Conducting zone and a respiratory zone. Right? Now, I want to bring another point here to your attention. Whenever you go to doctor and complain to the doctor, I feel a little bit difficult in breathing. I have some cough also. I get the mucus, cough, like that. Doctor start examining you. He'll take a stethoscope and he'll start finding, is there any problem in the breathing rate and all. He just examines you. And he may ask you sometimes, take a deep breath or simply breathe forcibly there. And after examining you, he may just say, it is a simple upper respiratory tract infection. Don't worry, gargle 2-3 times, nothing happens, you'll become all right. Very rare nowadays to get such a doctor. Okay, anyhow, a good doctor, reasonable doctor. Okay, he may suggest you, he may advise you like that, and he may ask you, need not to take any medicine, you are perfect, all right. You are consulting your family doctor. But sometimes the doctors may say, your lower respiratory tract is infected, yes, we require liquid treatment. Yeah. Now, whenever you cough, you get to 2 types of cough. Sometimes you cough only some sort of irritation in the pharyngeal region. But sometimes you will be coughing that like that. You feel that some sort of discomfort in the chest region, and the mucus comes from the chest region. That is infection of the lower respiratory tract. Even though you simply get a cough sometimes, it is only here in the pharyngeal region, in the throat region. So, your respiratory tract can be divisible into or differentiated into 2 parts: upper respiratory tract and lower respiratory tract. Which is upper respiratory tract? Your respiratory system up to including larynx including larynx, is coming under upper respiratory tract. Your respiratory tract up to larynx is included in the upper respiratory tract. Your respiratory tract that is present within the thorax, inside the thorax, within thorax, is referred to as lower respiratory tract. It is referred to as lower respiratory tract. This is upper respiratory tract. So remember, that part of the respiratory system which is outside the thoracic region is referred to as upper respiratory tract. The one which is present inside the thoracic region is called lower respiratory tract. Right? So we have seen now, you have studied one, the conducting part and the respiratory part. Another division of the respiratory system is upper respiratory tract and lower respiratory tract. Right? So now let us continue further. The lungs are situated in the thoracic chamber, which is anatomically an airtight chamber. Airtight chamber. The thoracic chamber is formed, look here, dorsally by the vertebral column, ventrally by the sternum, breastbone, laterally by the ribs, and on the lower side by the dome-shaped diaphragm. Dome-shaped diaphragm. Let us see this. Look here. This is what your thoracic chamber. This thoracic chamber, this is what? Sternum. Sternum. Also known as breastbone. Here, it is in your ventral part. Sternum, also known breastbone. This is a breastbone, sternum or breastbone. And what do you see on the dorsal side? It is written T12. T12 means a thoracic 12 vertebra. This is backbone. Backbone, also we call it vertebral column. Vertebral column, or it is a backbone. And these are the ribs. These are all the ribs. And now, here of course you come across, it is not shown, here you come across a dome-shaped diaphragm. Dome-shaped diaphragm. So, our thoracic chamber is formed of dorsally vertebral column, backbone, ventral by the sternum, breastbone, lateral by the ribs, and on the lower side by dome-shaped diaphragm. Right? Dome-shaped diaphragm. The anatomical set of lungs in thorax is such that any change in the volume of the thoracic cavity necessarily reflects the change in the lung or pulmonary cavity. Any change in the volume of thoracic cavity. You breathe in, your thoracic cavity volume changed. Necessarily, inside the lung cavity or pulmonary cavity volume is also increased. This is what. When you breathe in, your thoracic cavity also enlarges, lung cavity also enlarges. Such an arrangement is essential for breathing, as we cannot directly alter the pulmonary volume. Without increasing the volume of thoracic cavity, you cannot simply increase the volume of pulmonary cavity. Pulmonary volume cannot be raised without raising that of the thoracic volume or thoracic cavity. Right? So we are going to study this aspect in the next class. But remember, our respiration involves these steps. What are the steps? Breathing. Breathing is a simple word which is also known as pulmonary ventilation. That is, making the air containing oxygen to go in and the air containing carbon dioxide to come out. Breathing or pulmonary ventilation, by which atmospheric air is drawn in, and carbon dioxide rich alveolar air is forced out, released out. This is what breathing, simply called pulmonary ventilation. Taking in of oxygen, giving out of carbon dioxide. Diffusion of gases across alveolar membrane. Diffusion of gases across alveolar membrane. Then, transport of gases by the blood from alveoli starts once that gas is moved from atmosphere to alveoli, alveoli to that of the blood vessels in the alveoli, transport of gases by the blood. Diffusion of this blood comes later to the tissues, diffusion of oxygen and carbon dioxide between blood and tissues. So first, diffusion of gases across alveolar membrane, that is to the blood vessels, alveoli to blood capillaries. Then after that, from there, transport of gases by the blood to the tissue level. In the tissue level, diffusion of oxygen, carbon dioxide between blood and tissues. Then utilization of this oxygen by the cells for breaking down of glucose, which is referred to as cellular respiration. Utilization of oxygen by each and individual cells. That is, utilizing glucose, breaking down the glucose with the help of oxygen to make us to get the energy required to do the different functions. So these are all involved in the respiration. Respiration was all these following steps, and these all steps we are going to study in our next class.